everything.
Okay, so Danny Shine, he's a Speaker's Corner regular and a sort of provocateur extraordinaire, and a YouTube phenomenon of his own, actually, long before COE came along and others came along. He invited me down to meet with Roger Hallam, because Roger Hallam wanted him to do some political campaigning that might be connected together. And so he invited me to come along to a meeting with Roger Hallam. I went down there and joined Danny in a kind of surreal come Marxist discussion with Roger Hallam about what Extinction Rebellion is and what it signifies. And we had quite a good discussion. I mean, it would be very good if we could invite Roger Hallam or Gail, can't remember what name is, Gail, the other leader of Extinction Rebellion. I'd like them to come to Speaker's Corner, debate with us about the ideas which they've got, the movement which they've got, and, you know, the type of campaigning they're doing. And, you know, ideally, I think they should occupy Hyde Park and have debates down here. This is the oldest place for free speech in the world, that's, you know, where people speak on platforms and discuss. And it's here that they should be arguing the case to try and win hearts and minds, or to show that their arguments are correct and accurate. That's my opinion about it. Have you got questions? Fire with them.
Okay, I've got a lot. I mean, the questions that I'm going to be asking, some of them are kind of a little bit way out.
That's good.
Yeah.
So if you want, so
yeah.
Fine.
Why do you have a problem with extinction? What's wrong with extinction?
Great question. Well, on balance, life seems to be more attractive than death. On balance.
Right.
So maybe you can take it back to Camus with his, you've got a choice to commit suicide or to live. If you want to be philosophical.
Right. So
And
on life,
having decided not to commit suicide, which is the central question of life according to him, which I think is a slight exaggeration, being a French philosopher, it's quite exaggerated somewhat.
Right.
But the general idea is once you decided you don't want to commit suicide, then you're sort of committed to a pro-life philosophy, so you get on with it.
right.
And so yeah.
I mean,
That's one way of looking at it, isn't it?
you know, aren't we all going extinct? You know, isn't each one of us, you know, isn't the thing about human beings as opposed to, you know, the animals? I would have thought is that we really are quite different to each other. We're like a species. Each of us is a species of its own, and we're all going extinct, as far as I know. And that's wonderful. You know, it's there'll be no more problems, no more suffering. Just be fine. We're just, you know, I'm going to experience the great nothingness. And so I don't understand why, you know, what problem you have with extinction, bearing in mind that it is how life works. You know, everything's going extinct eventually. So what?
I don't think you're being serious.
I am being serious. I mean, it sounds funny, but I am kind of being serious.
I know you're kind of, but you're not
Well,
being really serious.
I am. I think
No,
I
not
am.
because, like, if he dropped dead now with a heart attack, you'd be on the phone straight away to the emergency services.
Yeah, I might
to
do
save your
that.
mate.
I might do that.
No,
but-
you wouldn't mind.
No,
you
I would do that. Okay, I would do
Okay.
that. But that doesn't. But that.
Let's
Hold on a
do it.
second. But that doesn't. That's not about extinction. I wouldn't in every case. I wouldn't keep on reviving him if he was old, or if he was in really bad pain. No, you're not, right? If you were in really bad pain, I wouldn't. Yeah. So I'm not against his extinction. I'm just, you know, I'm saying, yeah, I'm all for the idea of supporting life as much as you can whilst it's here. But, you know, you're rebelling against, you know, one of the things that, yeah, it seems like you're, you know, at a deeper level, the idea of rebellion, Extinction Rebellion, is like it's as if you're rebelling against life itself, because extinction is part of life, is it not? So, you know, yes, I'm all for making life better here while we're here, but I'm also all for extinction, right? So, in other words, one of my questions for you is, you know, there are two things, allegedly, the two greatest things you can do if you're concerned about the environment, which I assume you are very concerned about the environment. Yeah, I'm assuming that's the case. You're genuinely right. Am I right about that? You're very concerned about the environment.
Well, I'm not that much into the word environment.
Okay, but okay, so how would you describe it then?
Well, I'm not really into overly intellectualized sort of constructions. You know,
No, but how would you describe your obviously you put your whole self in behind this huge movement. You've got loads of people because you must care about something. What is it that you care about deeply?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? You know, people have got families,
Right.
and on balance, you want your family to thrive.
Right.
And not on balance, like anyone.
So you care about other people.
You care about the people you love,
Right.
and you care about your community, and some people care about their society,
Okay.
and some people care about the human race, and some people care about the natural world. So you're just going up those stages,
Right.
but just
And
about everyone who's not a psychopath, like, cares about the people that love them, and you don't want the best for those. That seems a pretty universal transcultural orientation. And if we carry on putting carbon into the atmosphere, then that's not going to be the case.
Right.
It's as simple as that. I mean, we can philosophise about the ultimate meaning of life and death, but, you know, that's slightly above my pay grade.
Yeah, no, I get that.
What are the consequences? Because I was involved in a Marxist group for many years, and we always used to say, or better said, the leader used to say, in 5, 10 or 15 years, we'll change society. And if we don't change society, you know, we'll have barbarism, right? And that was 30 years in that group, right? So I went through two cycles, at least two maximum cycles. So the problem I found was, and that was one of the reasons why I clashed with the group ultimately, was that the motivation driving members of the group focused around this concept that the sole purpose of their life activity was to achieve the objectives set by the organisation. And so they gave up part of themselves, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, in trying to pursue the objectives of the organisation. And that's why I'm concerned about, for example, the 12-year deadline that you talk about, for example, and other people I've heard talking about. When I did some interviews on the street with people, they said the same thing. If you say 12 years are left before, I don't know what would you like to say is going to happen in 12 years' time. I mean, I've heard various levels, but some people are saying, you know, basically extinction of mankind is possible, and, you know, generalised destruction, sort of, you know, the 4 horses of the apocalypse are coming. But if you say that, if we don't manage to achieve the objectives, or if your movement doesn't manage to achieve, or other movements don't manage to achieve the objectives you're setting, where do you go in 5 years' time, in 7 years' time, in 10 years' time, 1 year before the 12 years are up? What are you prepared to do then? What would be justifiable, whether in your mind or in the mind of people perhaps who follow that belief?
Well, the general orientation of Extinction Rebellion is the literature seems to provide robust evidence that mass participation in civil disobedience is the most effective way of creating structural change in a society in the short term.
Sure.
You know, you've got a short-term strategy. I mean, I've just been arguing with this nice Italian Marxist, you know, there's obviously a Gramscian strategy as well. And, you know, I spent most of my life being quite sympathetic to the Gramscian culturalist strategy. And, but, you know, facts are facts, as you might say. And I think the problem with the left orientation is they still think nature is a social construction. They think like you're in your Marxist group and you have this social where you were, you know, and Marxists sort of reify the social, make it real, but it's not. Like, social arrangements are basically flexible. You know what I mean? They're mutable, but physics isn't mutable. So there's a confusion. Like, Marxists tend to make like the social situation into a physical reality, reify it, and say like these are objective laws of history, and the system's going to collapse. Well, that's actually incorrect, as we all know now. is it's actually very difficult to predict social arrangements because it's too complex. But the opposite error is made, which people think that the natural world is a social construction. Well, obviously in some ultimate sense it is, because everything's social construction, but in a sort of commonsensical way, you know, you go to a doctor and he says you've got cancer, you know, that's not social construction, you are going to die, you know, that's not, you don't have an option. Do you see what I mean? So the argument is, what I think you're sort of saying is you don't like the idea of the 12-year thing because you don't like the notion of an end point. But my reply to that argument is whether you like or don't like the notion of an end point is not for you to like or not like, because it's a physical reality or not. So you have to have a look at the physics.
But your argument is that it's a social construct.
No.
Your argument is that in 12 years' time, the activity of man, in other words, social activity, is creating a situation whereby physics will lead to total destruction. So it is a social construct you're discussing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be any point in the praxis, would there? If it was inevitable.
Well, I'm saying that
regardless.
ultimately everything's social construction. But that's like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking in a commonsensical way. As I've just said, if you go to a doctor and says you're going to die because your lungs are filled up with whatever, then that is it.
But you were saying that Extinction Rebellion is like the fire alarm, or in that case, the doctor, who can offer a type of treatment, provided you take that treatment or bring about that change. Right. Then you can amend the outcome.
There's an issue about the 12 years, but then there's an issue when you go to the doctor and he says you've got 6 months to live. You know, there's 101 Hollywood dramas on this, isn't there? Where, you know, it could be 3 months or it could be 9 months. But, you know, you just need to do... If you want to be statistical about it, like it's a thick tail, there's a thick tail probability curve. You familiar with that? So, like normal distributions, if you say something's going to happen in the future, normally there's a normal distribution, which means it's pretty likely to happen, but you've got thin tails. It could be really soon, or it could be quite a long time in the future, right? But you're pretty certain, you're 80% certain it will be, you know, X, right? The problem with climate change is that it's got thick tails. So we could come up with, you know, something to suck carbon out of the atmosphere in the next 5 years, and then we might be all right, you know, who knows, right? I mean, apparently it is possible. But there's also like a thick tail on the other side, which says there's probably, you know, maybe for the sake of argument, there's a 40% chance we're completely fucked already. But no one can quite work it out because, you know, there's too much variability. Now that's quite difficult. Thick tail distributions are quite difficult to turn into slogans. But it doesn't, do you see what I mean? Because, you know, it's obviously it's a little bit of a simplification to say we've got 12 years left. But the point is all Extinction Rebellion is really saying in a more sophisticated sense is the obvious, you know. If you keep putting carbon into the atmosphere, the likelihood of, you know, system collapse and civilizational collapse, which will lead to the extinction of the species, becomes higher and higher. That's all we need to know. That's all, you know.
By putting a time frame on it, which you're not certain about, you are effectively being like a doctor who says you got cancer in 6 months to live.
Because when you
but you may be completely wrong.
No, not completely wrong, possibly wrong.
He may have 60 years to live.
Exactly. Well,
and by saying that I've got 6 months to live, and then prescribing a whole lot of medication, which could kill me itself. Yeah, that's the analysis. That isn't that analogous to what you're doing. You're saying you've got 12 years. You don't really know. It could be a lot more. But in that time, we're going to have to act like, you know, in this emergency way. I mean, there's so many questions and then there's so little time. I don't know. Let me move to a different question, which is sort of more.
Well, let me just finish off that little section by saying, just for the record.
Yeah.
Extinction Rebellion is not some reductionist. It doesn't have a reductionist messaging.
Right.
It's not saying 12 years and that's it. That's just part of the message. Right. If you look at the talk, it gives a whole load of data. Right. It's not like, hey, 12 years, bang. If you don't agree with that, you're against us, or anything reductive like that.
But there will be people who are following it, who perhaps are not well educated in the theme, who get a sort of. I mean, I remember.
Well,
when,
obviously, people
when
are always going to misunderstand
when nuclear
things.
war was
All I
like
can
1
say-
minute to 12.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
used to be suicidal about it.
No,
And,
no.
you know,
What I'm saying,
people-
though, because he wants to move on, all I'm trying to say is just put it out there officially. If you look at the talk, yours is 20 minutes of data there, and you can interpret it in loads of different ways.
Right.
But the fundamental message is you have to get on with it. And practically, it doesn't really matter, right? Do you see what I mean? I mean, if you go to the doctor, you can say, you've got 6 months to live, it could be 3, it could be 2 years. But the bottom line is, if you keep eating sugar and fat, you're going to speed it up. That's all you need to know. Or when you leave the doctor's surgery, all you need to know is you've got to cut out sugar and fat. And if you don't, then you could live for quite a long time, but you're highly likely not to. So that's the, Extinction Rebellion is a social movement. It's not a philosophical, debating society. I'm not against philosophical debating societies. All I'm saying is it's got a practical agenda, which is, however way you look upon it, we've got to stop putting carbon into the atmosphere. Otherwise, we're going to maximise the chances of us going extinct. And you can argue about the probabilities. It doesn't really matter, right? If your baby, drop a baby over a bridge into water, you can stand there sort of debating what the probabilities are that, if you're jumping after it, it'll save it, right? But you don't need to know, do you? Just jump in. Right. Do you see what I mean? So that's the practical issue cuts the Georgianian knot, or whatever it's called. Do you see what I mean? You can discuss all these stuff, and that's cool. I'm not against discussing all this stuff. I'm a very philosophical person. But when I get up in the morning, I'm just going got to stop carbon being put into the atmosphere.
How long have you been so passionate about the carbon dioxide thing? Because there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of environmental issues, which are, as far as I know, more. Like for example, the two. Well, there are the two things that I think the top number 1 and 2 priorities, right, that will make a huge difference to everything, including carbon emissions, is number 1. The encouragement of everybody on the planet as a concerted encouragement to stop reproduction, because reproduction is the number 1 cause of all this. See, if you think that humans, you obviously clearly believe that it's human behaviour that is causing the CO2 problem, which is then going to lead to catastrophic with the weather and then extinction. I don't have any problem with extinction. I say bring it on, right? But and I'm serious about that, right? I'm not saying we should kill everyone or kill ourselves, but I'm saying, it's all going to end anyway. But leave that aside, right? If you believe that humans are responsible for the climate, for the raising global temperatures and the catastrophes, then surely the first thing that you should be talking about is not, you shouldn't be going to the government, because the government are a bunch of crooks. But surely, you shouldn't be going to the government, because they can't organise a piss up in a brewery, They're all over the place and they're getting their instructions from up there and nobody quite knows what's going on, right? You should be going to all the parents and the potential parents in the world and saying to them, we've got an emergency at the moment, stop having children for the time being until we sort out this emergency. When this is over, maybe in 12 years' time, we can talk again. But between now and then, the best thing anybody could do is not have children. That's number 1. And the second best thing they can do is to stop seeing animals as food, right? Stop eating their products, stop eating them at all, because we know that the animal, I don't know if I'm right about this. I'm definitely not even claimed to be even a potential scientist, right? I'm so shoddy in my research. So I'm not saying that this is true, but as far as I know, those are the first 2 things. Vegan is the second most important thing. Not reproducing is the first most important thing, right? So I'm being honest. I think that your mobilization is obviously, which is your expertise, right? Your mobilization is being fantastically successful, and I don't know how the hell you did it, because I tried to organize something yesterday, a meeting online, and 3 people I managed to get together and somehow managed Google, Hangouts or something. Whereas, you've organised this, which is absolutely brilliant. And I'm wondering. Well, my first question to you before I go further in maybe exploring after these 2 weeks of yours, exploring how maybe we could incorporate this in, is why are you not telling the people, forget the government, tell the people to stop reproducing and stop eating meat and milk.
Well, I think you're being a twitsy-wincy bit reductive.
Why? Well, I mean, you can say I'm being anything, but I'm asking you, that's just describing my question. I'm genuinely asking you a question. Why don't you spread and it's fantastic. You can do so many people, so much. If you really care about people, yeah, you will save them from bringing in children into this crazy world. You'll save the children from having to put up with this ridiculous life and nasty government, yeah. You'll save the environment, yeah. And you'll reduce. The best way to reduce CO2 is to reduce the people, because they're the ones that are doing it. If you believe that it's human caused problem.
Yeah, well, I haven't necessarily got a problem with what you're saying, but what I think you've alluded to is how you actually get people to do stuff, right? So most people are very political, like you two, and generally have a sort of enlightenment reductive model of social change, which is, with all due respect, why not that successful, right? So you decide what's right, and then you have this idea you're going to tell the people, and then change is going to happen. But in that word, tell the people, is a very black box. People don't really concentrate on that little bit of the sentence, tell the people. What does that actually mean? So what I've spent 5 years researching is that little bit of the equation. So people go over that really quick. They spend 80% of their time thinking what's wrong, which is good. Someone's got to work out what's wrong, that's cool. And then it's jump to tell the people, as if they press a button and then suddenly the people go yes, right? Which is a reasonable hypothesis, It's not necessarily completely wrong. The point is it's highly simplistic. And my thesis, or what my research is based upon, is that tell the people a little bit needs to be massively expanded. How do you do that? What is it that enables that message to get across? And that's a big question. And one of the reasons why Extinction Rebellion has been successful is it's been filled with quite a lot of people that aren't actually that bothered about what's wrong with the world. They're more bothered with the psychology of mobilization. Do you see what I mean? So it's not like either or. Obviously, I'm really interested in what's wrong with the world. Obviously, I've been out 35 years, right? But what Rising Up did was start to flip over to a lot more of a practical question, which is, we know all this, right? But why is it not happening? And let's look at why it's not happening. And then you're looking at another literature. Do you see what I mean? Looking at a way of getting. So it might be great, for instance, this isn't the whole story because we haven't got enough time, but you might say you need to stop people having children, right? And then that sort of implies some sort of reductive thing. You go along the road, you knock on the doors. I mean, how are you going to do it? Concretely, how are you going to do it? So you're going to knock on the doors and say to people, let's say, here's a hypothesis. Knock on the doors and say, hello, Mrs. Jones, climate change is a really big problem and we'd like you to have less children, right? Okay, so there might be some problems with that. I mean, one of the problems is, she doesn't really care about climate change, for instance, well, let's leave that aside. She might say, well, actually, I love having children. And, or she might say, look, you're right, you're morally right, but that's how I'm going to get my security in old age. And so you're probably familiar with that, right? Which is the quickest way to reduce population growth. Is well established in social science. You improve the lot of women and you have contraception and all the rest of it. And that's how you get it to go down. So you don't get it through political moralisation. That's highly ineffectual. It's like the Catholic Church trying to tell people not to have sex. It's great. It might be great, it might not be great. But what we know for certain doesn't work. Right? You can't stop people having sex. So, I'm not saying that therefore you shouldn't be looking at it, but you need to have you need to focus on how you're going to bring it about, and, it's probably a valid criticism that XR doesn't really focus on the population issue, I've got a major problem with that. It's obviously, it's a no-brainer, right? You need to have less people in the world. I mean, there's arguments, you're probably familiar, right? There's a valid debate out there, on 10% of the world's population produces 50% of the carbon emissions. So it's not either or. Obviously, more people is bad, but also like having 10% of the people doing a Versailles, routine and eating all the stuff and everyone else starving. Well, the problem is Versailles, not all the peasants.
Right.
So, there's a valid sort of left-wing comeback to it. And obviously the truth, like on most things, is a bit of both, isn't it? But then you've got the practical problem, obviously, as Guy McPherson and, people have raised this issue. Obviously it's a practical problem that you can go blue in the face, but people still want to have kids because it's pretty evolutionary determinist.
What about the chain of power in society? Because I've seen you talking about wealth and power, the wealthy and powerful responsible for X, Y and Z. Why is the target not really aimed at them? For example, I noticed that Paul Polman, he was former CEO of Unilever. For 10 years he was CEO of Unilever. Unilever, through its interconnections with the global marketplace, I believe, I looked at the statistics, 50% of world grocery sales come from Unilever. This is one of the main polluters in the world. The Department of Defence, the US Department of Defence, the British military. These are massive polluting entities. I saw a study done, said the Department of Defence alone would be responsible for sufficient carbon production to destroy the world if you were using those sort of categories and frameworks of thinking. So why the target of the general public? I mean, obviously to raise awareness, but is that then a preparation to attack these entities? But if that's the case, why is Paul Polman suddenly declaring he's on side with Exile Business?
Well, I think the last point is a little bit like neither here nor there, really. But we can talk about that if you like. I think the more interesting thing is I think XR is returning to what you might call traditional political theory orientation, which is that the state and the civic body is the centre of power in a society. It's not the merchant class. So what that means is, this is like a difficult argument because we've had 30 years of ignoring this argument, really.
So you're saying the power of business over the state,
I'm saying in the
is
long
subordinate
term,
to the state.
Sociologically speaking, in the long term, the state trumps the merchant class. That's like in the long history, as looking from 1500 through the present day, the state basically determines the economy.
So does that imply that the merchant class can be your allies in the struggle against?
What I'm saying is there's two arguments. Number one is by getting the state to act, then because the state has a monopoly of violence, then the state can tame the merchant class. Right, that's an old political theory argument, both on the left and the right. Right, so it's got pros and cons sociologically speaking. So that's basically the thesis of Extinction Rebellion, which is new, of course, because the old argument is you go after the companies. But we're not. We're going after the state because we're saying the state's primary function is to protect the population. Right.
But what about if some of the big companies declare themselves in your support and then utilise the agenda of the green agenda in order to promote the gigantic?
I don't think that's like a big issue, but I'll deal with that in a minute. But the second idea is that the campaigning over the last 30 years is arguably been highly elitist in the sense that it doesn't involve the general public. Like it involves like a highly moralistic sort of minority that want to impose something without engaging with the general public. Like you just go straight to the company and, try and do it in. So the XR strategy is more like a classical democratic strategy, which is to go to the people, disrupt the people in as much as the people need to be disrupted in order for them to realise something bad's happening. And then the public engage, like they have done in the last 3 weeks. And once you've actually got the social body on side, as it were, then everything flows from that because the centre of power is the will of the people, in Enlightenment political theory.
You'd like that to be the case, or you think it is?
Well, both. But
how explain the Brexit paralysis if that was the case?
Well, the Brexit paralysis is like two different parts.
If that was
of the
the case,
body.
I'm saying.
But what I'm trying to say is like the biggest similarity is with the civil rights movement in the States, right? In 1961, everyone hates Martin Luther King. He's the most unpopular man in America, right? In 1967, he's like a saint. What happened between those 6 years is basically the social body of the United States had a moral crisis over institutionalized racism, and they decided that wasn't what they wanted to be like as a society. Now, obviously, that's a simplification. There's still loads of racism and blah, blah, blah. But the fundamental point is there's a shift in what you might call the main moral ideology of that society. So what Extinction Rebellion is doing is basically disrupting society to create a public debate about whether we want to destroy the next generation or two. So it's a reasonable prediction that once that's out and people start talking about it, then they'll realise they don't want to destroy the next generation.
But you accept that a trillionaire's got, or billionaire, multi-billionaire's got more power than a pauper in general, and therefore that they can, if that debate is accepted, they can come with the solutions which, may not be in the interest of the...
It's about a proposition that we care about the next generation and we're not going to allow them to die. So that's the big shift. Now, once you've come to that realisation, obviously there's a big question about how you're going to transform the economy, and the relation of capitalism.
But were you comfortable with the fact that within a couple of days of the launch of Extinction Rebellion protests, that 34 big banks and regulators declared their support, or effectively declared their support, including Mark Carney, Bank of England, Bank of France, Paul Polman made his declaration in support of Extinction Rebellion business, whatever that is. Isn't it a bit weird that there's these giant, interest groups?
It is if you think that Extinction Rebellion is a political issue rather than an existential issue. So there's a fundamental problem on the left is they can't conceive that something could not be political, right? If there's a meteorite coming towards the Earth, that's fundamentally not political. I mean, it's got political aspects because you've got to decide who's going to work to stop the meteorite. There's always politics in every social situation. But
so what does it mean that you're not political? Everything's political.
Everything's political, but not.
So what do you mean it's not?
Everything's
political?
Got a political aspect.
The point is that the question was, and this is sort of a question that I would ask in a slightly different way. It's like, you obviously care about people and the world and life. Yeah. You may find it difficult to conceive. I find it difficult to conceive what it would be like to not care. But the people who run these corporations, don't care. They don't have compassion. They couldn't, right? The people who run right at the top of all these organisations, they're psychopathic in nature. That's the chances are, And these people have got huge interests. We're talking about interests of hundreds of billions of dollars, And don't you think that if you had interest, if you can get out of your mind and put your mind into a psychopathic guy who is absolutely addicted to money and power, like crack cocaine, don't you think any half-sane person who's a billionaire is going to is looking for an angle in everything, looking for a money angle in everything? They don't care about the environment because they're the ones that are the problems. Unilever, whatever, are the polluters, as are BP and the military and they all don't. No corporation can care about the environment because the idea of a corporation is a dead fiction that makes money, right? So it can't. And the people at the top of them have, they don't care, right?
Yeah, okay.
And therefore they're going to have an interest in finding a way to make money out of the whole thing, and at the same time to control any kind of opposition that is going to come about. And it seems like there's some strange things going on.
But like everything you've just said is like the defeatist narrative of the left since 1989, which is these guys are really powerful. The subliminal message is whatever you do is going to fail, right? Now, that's like a psychological thing. It's not empirically correct, right? Ruling classes are taken down all the time during history, and we know how it happens, which is they start destroying themselves, right? And the ruling class is in the process of destroying itself in the most archetypical way at the moment. So the other point is practically everything you've just said is irrelevant, right? Because it doesn't matter how bad the bad guys are.
Right.
What we need to focus on is the positive, which is what is the mechanism of mobilisation? The mechanism of mobilisation is we're either going to get there or not, but we're going to maximise the probabilities by maximising mobilisation. And what's the methodology of mobilisation? Disruption and sacrifice. You have to disrupt the system comes down, hits people on the head, that involves sacrifice. Sacrifice creates a backfiring effect, that means more people are mobilised, they come out into the street, game over, right?
But if the head of Legal in General says we've got £1 trillion in funds that we've got locked up, pension funds and so on, and we're going to chuck that into a carbon capture device because you guys are protesting and we think this is a good way of trying it out, they don't have any evidence that things work, and they get like huge funds from the public to finance their project, which may just go be a complete waste of time, even for the objectives which are stated. Is that all right?
Don't know. It's up to people to decide.
But how are they going to
Yeah,
decide
what I
this?
focused on.
If a climate emergency has been declared and they say this is now our fiduciary duty to protect people's finances by investing in harebrained schemes that they call carbon capture scheme, expanded to the X potential.
The best way we've discovered over the last 500 years to deal with power is democracy, right? Which is the will of the people, which is not corrupted by the merchant class, right? And obviously, like, there's loads of historical examples of people coming together and trumping the merchant class.
So why a citizens' assembly and not a constituent assembly?
Well, there's variations on the thing. Now, once you've made that general point, you can have loads of arguments about different, people have been arguing about different ways of doing democracy.
Well, a constituent assembly is an elected body, a citizens' assembly not.
Yeah, so, there's pros and cons. We can get into that, but we've only got 10 minutes left. But the point is that, you need to focus on the fundamentals. The fundamental is we're all like just bollocksing away unless we create mobilisation, right? I mean, that's great, but that's not, you can go and talk to someone else. I've got things to do, right? What I'm interested in is mobilising, because unless you've got the mobilisation, everything's academic, right?
Well, the mobilisation aspect of it, I mean, I like what you say about mobilisation. I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah.
The problem is about mobilising for what? That's the and I don't have a problem about mobilising around ecological issues either. I don't have any problem with that.
Right.
The question is, who are you, what's the connection there between
so my reply
X
to
and
that
Z?
question is another practical response, which is we don't quite know. And all we know is we're going to experiment with creating a genuine, semi-genuine democratic space, which is going to be better than the corrupted space we've got now. Do you see what I mean? And that's the best we can do. There's no point like being a little bunch of intellectuals and sort of laying down the law. That's not how social change happens. It's like an organic process. You need to just create that space, and that space will determine what the outcomes are. And it will probably be semi-crap, you know what I mean? Because it's history. It's not going to be perfect. So, for instance, like we may have a voting system, we may have a sortition system. There's pros and cons. I haven't got that strong opinion on it. All I'm concerned about at the moment is one step at a time to create the political space whereby something like that can happen. See, the problem with the sort of intellectual left is it doesn't want to actually get anywhere until it's sorted everything out. But if you're a complexity theorist like me, it's impossible to predict. So it becomes, it's academic in the worst sense of the word. Do you see what I mean? It's not that I'm not concerned about what you're saying. I've talked to you, I've spent like 10 years studying deliberative democracy. We can have a good chat about it. But at this stage of the game, it's like opening up that space. Do you see what I mean? Closing down central London with 10 to 20,000 people, And then the fact of the matter is those people, not the three of us, will determine what happens.
But I mean, like Notting Hill Carnival once upon a time was a sort of very grassroots thing. Woodstock was a very grassroots thing. The Free Festival in Hyde Park, very grassroots thing. Yeah. But then big money comes in and corrupts it.
I know. Right?
So at what point do you say, if you're beginning the embryonic beginning of a genuine movement, and there were many people there who I believe engaged in what they believe is a genuine movement, if then giant funding's coming in and says, okay, here's XR Rebellion, like 3 times the size of Glastonbury, funded by them, is that fine?
No, there's about 10 things you can do, none of which are going to completely remove that problem, right? It's a problem, but it's not an insurmountable problem. So the problem with your argument is the subliminal message is you can't succeed.
No, it's not that at all.
I'm sure you're more intelligent than that, but you know what I'm trying to say. Is the left has been saying, left is like critique obsessed, which is good. Someone's had to criticise things, but it's out of balance. What we need to focus on is like the positive, creative processes of rebellion. Do you see what I mean? And so you've got your valid critique, right? There's a load of valid critiques, right? One of the valid critiques is it's going to get taken over by big money. Good.
But how do you stop it? That's what
There's about 10 things. Do you want me to go through them?
Yeah.
But they're all technical.
Well, I mean, look, XR business. What was that? I didn't understand what that was. I mean, why were these people
I'm
suddenly
not quite
lying?
sure, but I'm not that bothered about it.
Okay.
Because, you know, Extinction Rebellion has now got like 50, 100,000 people in it. This reductive idea that some capitalists are going to come in and corrupt it all, it's just not going to happen because of these 10 things.
Well, it's not just Extinction Rebellion. It's that there is, World Economic Forum and many other entities are pushing financialisation of nature and utilisation of resources for private.
Let's be concrete. What exactly is XR business going to do? You know what I mean?
Provide funding for resources for campaigns.
It doesn't need it. We've just raised £600,000, right? It's mainly come from small donations.
Okay, but it wasn't only from small donations, was it? There was like £50,000 hedge fund donation.
I don't know.
According to Gale, there was.
Because we're not corruptible like that. It is possible to build a social movement that isn't corruptible. I mean, not totally.
For sure.
Right?
So
how do you do that?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. How you do that is by being grassroots, right? Going to normal people, having semi-autonomous groups. So you don't have a command and control structure, by having a culture, so you have lots of training events on what you're about, so that the mainstream culture doesn't come in by default, by having really clear aims and principles that you tell people beforehand, by being action based, so it doesn't become a talking shop, by having a holocratic structure, so that people at the top basically take feedback and they rotate. Okay, so it's 4 or 5 more. None of them are going to guarantee it, but they're substantially less likely to get corrupted than traditional political party or what have you. I mean, there's other problems. The main problem is the lack of direction problem, the Occupy problem. That's the main problem, not being taken over by capital. I mean, that's a bit of an old hat problem. The main problem is social media and disorganisation. That's the main problem. Why social movements fail. I mean, look at France. They've got 100 people saying that they lead the movement. They're fucked because they can't finish the job. You can go to the streets as much as you like, but until you actually have an agenda, do you see what I mean? So there's people trying to work that out, and we've had dogmatic horizontalism for 30 years, and it's real. It's a problem. I've got a problem. I mean, I've got an anarchist background, so I think it's super duper that horizontalism is great. But like everything, it's got its downsides, hasn't it? So I mean, I'm a technician. Do you see what I mean? You can probably tell. I mean, I can talk about philosophy, but fundamentally, I'm a technician. I'm just I'm a designer, and that's why Extinction Rebellion has worked. In the same way as the Chinese Communist Party is full of engineers, right? Why did they bring about that miracle of economic growth? I mean, whether it's good or bad is another matter, right? They brought it about because they're they've got engineering minds. You're going, here's a problem, let's look at, empirically based solutions to it. Does that work? Does it work to have biscuits on the table when you have a public meeting? Yes. You don't talk about that in your Marxist theory class, right? Biscuits on the table. But as it happens, biscuits on the table is, I would argue, a pretty fundamental determinant of whether people walk out of a meeting feeling empowered. People like to eat.
But I mean, what point? I mean, but if a business is coming to the table and putting biscuits on the table, putting big dinners on the table, which I've seen many times before, in genuine grassroots movements that have been engaged in some project that there's a Samuel Johnson, I think it was, he used to say, "You're dining with the devil, you need a long spoon." So.
Sorry, have we
short
got any
time.
more?
You've got 3 minutes.
Do you want to tell me about what this next couple 2.5 weeks?
Yeah.
What do you have in mind?
Briefly then. So
Where are you standing for? Where are you standing? Where are you
the
elections?
EU election.
Where?
What area?
Oh, London. It's weird, isn't it?
Oh,
It's it's
how
a bit
many
of a
people
head
stand in London?
there's 7 of us standing in London. It's like a big multiple constituency.
Right.
You've got one vote, but it's basically some weird system.
What, the whole of London?
The whole of London is one
vote?
constituency, and
Right.
10 people go to Brussels,
Right.
Strasbourg or wherever. But that's not
10
the
people
issue.
go. They vote 10 in.
Yes,
Right.
it's like the 10
10.
top. I don't know, it's complicated,
Right.
these things are. But anyway, that's all rubbish, right? That's not the point. The point is the whole media is basically now focused on the Brexit sort of, election
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of, So it's like, from a strategic point of view, what Extinction Rebellion is doing, or this whole space is doing, It's basically like going into spaces like you did with that cafe. You know, everyone's sitting there thinking they're having a nice dinner, and you walk in and just go, "Hey guys, there's a world out there and it's getting fucked. So why don't you rebel?" Do you know what I mean? Or whatever you said, and everyone's going, "Oh right, yeah, okay." And it's like disruptive, isn't it? And like so, you know, a lot of the empirical research is what you did then is highly effective. You know, from a input-output sort of reductive sense, right? People can go, well, it looks great, it goes viral, right? So the idea of the next 2.5 weeks is to just do mad things,
Right.
Just to, you know, whatever it is, it just needs to be mad. So, like, I want a bunch of us to swim across the River Thames, right, to Parliament, to say that London's going to be, you know, flooded in 30 years, right? But it doesn't matter what the message is, it's just like a fucking mad thing to do.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? So I was thinking of you, and I was thinking, yeah, I've always been really impressed with what the sort of stuff you do. And I just, because I'm a bit of a surrealist myself, like, it horrifies me that this society is completely lost. It's just a completely one-dimensional culture.
Why
You don't want like a million people like you. That'd be really weird, right? But in any usual society, there has to be a critical mass of fools, otherwise it's fucked, right? You know, because as we all know, like, the fool has an important political role in society. You know, I don't mean a fool in a degrading way, right? I'm serious, right?
Yeah.
You know, you need people to basically say mad things and do mad things, and that's how you maintain social health, according to various blah blah blah. So basically, we've got this. I'm going at 12 o'clock. That's why I've got to leave. You know, otherwise, and you know, I think you're both great. By the way, it's nothing personal. I'm just going to go. But
where are you going to? Oh, you're going to the meeting.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss it. So it's a really eclectic group. Like, there's 3 black guys in it. There's a woman who's 19. She's going to be the main candidate. She's black. She's sexy. She's just. So we're going to have this mad thing of saying, "Don't vote for me. Vote for this fucking black 19-year-old woman," right? And she's just like never done anything political, but she's sassy and.
Right.
So that's going to be a bit disruptive because you've got all the suits and then you've got days, you know. Do you see what I mean? So that's a bit weird. And then, yeah, and I've got this routine, this sort of Monty Python-esque idea that we just go into forbidden spaces, which is just about everywhere in London,
Right.
set up our trestle table. We're all going to wear suits, but with pumps on, so we look a little bit like not quite right, with camping chairs, and we sit down in that space and we have a press conference. And we just tell people what's wrong. So we're going to, say, Foxtons. I've been wanting to do this for about 3 years.
Oh, that's nice.
Going to Foxtons, right, you know, in Mayfair, you know, 40 of us, set up, someone juggling in the background, you know, housing crisis. This is why it's a problem. This is why it's fucked. This is why you should rebel. And then the security arrives, so then you've got the embodiment of the message. The security then drag everyone out. It's live streamed. It goes viral. Do you see what I mean? And people watching. It's fun. You know, it's like, do you see what I mean? Something like that. So you know, it doesn't really matter. It just needs to be a bit.
Okay, let me have a think about. Let me have a think about it. See if I come up with any ideas. You know, but stay in touch with me over the next couple of weeks. Tell me what you're doing, and I can always tag along. Be part
Exactly,
of it.
and there's no pressure or
Megaphone
anything. You know what I
outside.
mean? It's not like you know, we're all mates.
Okay.
Yeah, we did something outside the Shard the other day, and it was actually on the back of your movement that they behaved so politely because they initially came over, warned us, and then they just left us stand right in front of the front door.
Yeah,
And all the bods come out.
Usually people, you know, the great thing about XR is it's created this space for political creativity. You know, because you do stuff, you can go to Starbucks, right, and nothing's going to happen, right, because you don't get to critical mass. Well, now, because this is the beauty of spending £40,000 standing for the EU election. I mean, someone's giving us a load of money.
Right.
Sorry, not that corruptible, don't panic. But anyway, and so we've got that media thing. Like, if we just did it when we weren't candidates, then maybe you wouldn't be interested. But it's like, you know, candidates from climate and ecological emergency independence were arrested today in Foxtons, you know.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you get that extra status for being a candidate. So that's the logic of it. And yeah.
Okay, so let's be in touch, and maybe we can continue the discussion as well, and see, you know, because I mean, as I say, I like what you've done here, the mobilisation, but I've got a personal, agenda, which is basically, to reduce reproduction and reduce meat eating. I think they're the two.
Well,
most,
meat eating is a synergy.
I think they're the biggest things we can do
cool.
to help.
Cool trip. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm not going to get all reductive about it.
So I'm wondering if we can.
Then you should do something around that.
Yeah.
You do something on meat or something or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Then.
All right.
And maybe we'll meet.
Come take over everything from your humanity. Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
On Speaker's Corner, I've got a new book out called The Three Dimensions of Freedom. I'm here to make the argument that freedom is not just free speech alone. It's also about liberty, about equality, and about accountability. And that if you only have free speech, you're not really free, because free speech without equality is privilege, and free speech without accountability is authoritarianism.
Exactly. How do you define free speech?
Huh?
How do you define free speech?
Freedom of expression, to express whatever you want to say.